Hi, Jackie.
Hi, all. Britt, did you get a haircut or is that your hair
It's just in a ponytail. My bangs are growing out, so it looks different.
looks great
Usually
anyway.
straight across. Yeah. It's actually the exact opposite is the problem. You must be getting close, eh, Jackie? Are you getting excited?
Yeah, just about 8 weeks away from the due date. I'm feeling very large.
You can't tell from this angle.
Yeah, you never know.
Duncan and I got haircuts, Jackie.
You know what? You both look fresh. I love it.
I got a haircut too,
yesterday.
right? Okay, I think we got 1 minute to go. Check everybody's mute.
It's a moment of silence.
It's like the longest minute. All right, it is 4:30. I'm calling this meeting to order. I'd like to acknowledge that the District of Tofino operates within the territory of the Tla-o-qui-aht First Nation, Tla-o-qui-aht First, and a notice to attendees that the meeting is being video recorded and will be published on the District of Tofino's YouTube channel. So before we adopt the agenda, I do have a question for council. Is there anything, any items they would like removed from the consent agenda? Now is the time to remove them. Seeing none, I will move on with an amendment to the agenda to remove the closed session item 14. So seeing no opposition, I will move that the closed session be removed. Seeing no opposition, closed session is removed. And without further ado, I'll move that the August 10th, 2021 regular council agenda be adopted. And if there are no objections, that motion is carried. So this is where we go to the consent agenda. And just a little overview for everybody. This is new to us, new to our procedure bylaw. And the purpose of this is to simply get through a lot of items quickly and efficiently. And there is, of course, options for councillors to request any of these items be removed and put into the regular agenda. So if there is no opposition to the consent agenda as presented, I'll move that the items on the consent agenda of the regular council meeting held August 10th, 2021 be approved and received. And if there is no objection, that motion is carried. Seeing no objection, that motion is carried. Let's see what else we have here. I have adoption of minutes as item 4, but I have no other information. Okay, just move along. Do we have minutes to adopt from the previous regular council meeting? I just noticed this now.
Thank you, Mayor Law. We just adopted them in the consent agenda.
Oh, sorry.
So we did. So that's something that I just noted now. We always try to keep the headings at our meetings, even if there's nothing there, just so we know that the order of the meeting is still there. But if we do have minutes, they will always go under that adoption of minutes section. And if we don't, and they're consent agenda, it will just adopt them in the consent agenda. So everything's working perfectly.
Perfectly. This gets me every time. I read through the list and then it gets me. Okay, so there you go. The minutes are adopted through the consent agenda. Public comment on agenda items. Do we have any public comment?
Thank you, Mayor Law. We don't have any attendees at the moment. Oh, it looks like we might have one just came in, but I don't have anyone who has signed up for anything at this point.
Okay, then we're moving on to 6, Mayor's Report. I'm pleased to announce that the Community Children's Center advertisement for a educational position where education is paid for and provided by the District of Tofino for an early childhood education employee. That is now closed and there are many applicants. So that process will be moving quite quickly forward with interviews. Well done on that one, staff. Thank you. Paid parking is going into effect today. I have not had a update on that, but hopefully that is going well. Seems to be the community is responding to the needs of parking and infrastructure revenue and more. So here's hoping. A little note about phishing emails. They've been going out under councillors' names and of course my name as well. Just a reminder to all staff and the community at large to be very careful in responding to emails that look fishy, because they probably are. And one more thing on the mayor's report is that I've been working on approaching local fixed roof accommodation providers to discuss ways forward with the MRDT and if a portion of that can be used for the wastewater treatment plant. And I've been meeting with the various fixed roof accommodation providers and will continue to be meeting with them. And so far those discussions have been quite positive and I've had a good response from our local businesses. And would just like to point out that any way forward will be a collaboration and will require cooperation. This may be new and groundbreaking, but so far very positive and supportive feedback. That's it for Mayor's Report. Do we have any delegations? I don't see any. So moving on to correspondence, 8.1. WiMacTel Canada regarding removal of Telus Payphone. Do we have any comments from council? None. Seeing none, we're moving along. To 8.2, Ministry of Municipal Affairs regarding June regional calls. Any comment on this one before I comment? I just encourage everybody to read through. It's an excellent overview of what the ministry has been doing on multiple levels. I was very pleased to read this letter. Touched on many things from actually many things from housing to MRDT, et cetera, et cetera. Well done. We are moving on to 9, presentations and reports. 9.1, significant tree bylaw amendments, and we have a report from community sustainability.
Good afternoon, Mayor and Council. I actually don't have a presentation for the significant tree bylaw. I can describe it briefly. This bylaw is in relation to a recent zoning amendment that was passed at the end of Campbell Street, 200 Campbell Street. And as part of that rezoning, we had the applicant work with the applicant to protect some trees on the property, as well as some vegetation. And this is the end result of that. It's the protection of 5 trees on the property. It's going to be added to our existing tree bylaw, which I don't think has been touched since 2000 when the Ike Street tree was added to it. So far, we only have 1 other tree on the bylaw, and so soon we'll have 6.
Excellent. Go ahead, Councillor Chalmers.
If nobody has any comments, I would very happily move this, but I can wait and see if anybody has any comments.
I think there might be just a couple comments. So one that I have, are we reviewing the significant tree bylaw presently? We're in the process of that, are we not? Mr. Rogers? Oh, we are not.
No, I have a resolution from council to develop a tree bylaw, but it would be, from what I understand, it would be separate from this bylaw. So this was a bylaw we've had since 2000, and the tree bylaw that is on the work plan is to sort of develop a broader district tree bylaws.
Okay, perfect. Any other comments? Councillor Anderson, Councillor Thick.
I just had a question. I noticed that hemlocks were some of the trees mentioned in the bylaw. I know that quite often hemlocks are the ones that people are concerned about because they tend to break off as they get tall and old. And so they require either topping or removal at some stage. So just out of safety concerns, there's still an option for tree maintenance to protect property and people from falling trees. Okay, that's all.
Is there, do you have a answer for that, or is that just a
Oh,
comment?
sorry, I said yes.
Oh,
Correct.
yes. I didn't catch that. Yeah, perfect. Councillor Thick.
Thank you. I had a question about the trees and about what could happen if they were inadvertently either damaged or fallen. And from what I understand, you're telling me, and what I read is that there's 5 trees, and most of them are cedar. So I'm understanding that they're several hundred years old, although they're not very tall because of the proximity to the ocean. Am I correct in that so far?
I haven't looked back at the biologist report since I wrote the report originally, but I believe it's mostly hemlocks with a couple of cedars. Let me just pull up the bylaw thing here. Basically, the way that we do this is we work off a biologist report. So we have a professional biologist come in and undertake this work. And then staff are usually generally moving forward with those recommendations. But let me just grab the... Yeah, so we have a small cluster of historic red cedar on lot 1, and then a grove of hemlock.
Right. And so if what I'm reading is correct, the old bylaw said that if a tree was taken, there was a $500 fine. Am I reading this right? And that the proposal is to amend it to a $1,000 fine?
I'm just looking back at the old bylaw, didn't have a fine associated with it. So I'm just checking over as we're amending it. Sorry, I'm just gonna have to open the council. Just give me 1 minute here, please. Yeah, so we're adding fines into the fee the fee bylaw. Sorry, the fines into the bylaw notice and enforcement dispute adjudication bylaw. We're adding in a bylaw notice of $500, and we're adding just the MTI bylaw.
Right. And my question is, it seems very low to me from what I've read in other bylaws. So I'm just wondering if that number is too low, and, with the cost of wood and, for someone who's running a vacation rental business, it's perhaps only a 1-night stay. I'm just putting that in context so that we can understand that while $500 isn't insignificant, I guess I'm just questioning whether that's enough. That's my first question.
I think that's a question for council. Staff has looked into this. This is the first time we've looked at charging anybody for cutting down a tree in the District of Tofino, and so $1,000 was put in there as just sort of a reasonable amount. If council wishes to amend that, I'm all ears.
So,
Yeah, is there an upper limit? That's what I'm not sure about.
There will be, yeah, there will be, and something I might have to defer to Ms. Best about in terms of our limits when it comes to our MTI fines and our abilities in the municipal ticketing to increase it. There is an upper limit. I think it's $5,000. It may be $10,000 depending on the type of fee schedule that we're looking at.
Yeah, I think my question is that, you know, 5 or 10,000 to me would seem acceptable when you consider what's at stake here. And the property, you know, when you look at the plan and what the property has been rezoned for, and then you look at the proximity of the trees to what is being proposed, you know, in my view, we're missing a zero in that 500. I think it should be 5,000 minimum personally. Otherwise, there's really not much to lose by cutting down a tree, either by damaging it or inadvertently cutting it. And from reading other bylaws, it seems that that would be maybe something that we should be looking at. It would be more to the norm. So my question for council is, if that is, you know, if 5,000 is something that we can consider, that is something I would like to propose in terms of the fine for, if those trees, of all the work that has gone into this, I think, and after writing letters about old growth logging, you know, I think it would be in our interest to hold the same esteem for these trees as they've been designated by the biologists. So that's my question for council.
Councillor McMaster, Councillor Steer.
I would support increasing the fines to 5,000 to 10,000. Otherwise, I don't think it's a deterrent. I think $500 to $1,000. I think I would take the trees down and hope I didn't get caught. And if I did get caught, well, then it's probably not a lot of money in the grand scheme of things.
Councillor Steer, and then Councillor Anderson.
Yeah, I would support Councillor Thick's request. I think would it be a question of having staff look into what those limits are and then coming back to council with an amended bylaw to, I think, well, we'll see if it's unanimous in terms of our support for an increase in that amount, but to have staff come back to look at what those upper limits are so that we can be accurate in the figure that we attach to it.
Councillor Anderson.
Yeah, I've heard that some jurisdictions have fines as high as $30,000, and people will still remove trees if they want to expand their property enough. So I know that maybe that's not the same here as in some jurisdictions, what property values are worth and how much people want to expand. But yeah, they could even be higher, I think, than $10,000 in some places. The other thing I'm thinking of is that the value of an old cedar tree is probably upwards of $10,000 in its lumber value. So I think that might be considered as well. Just the value of the lumber itself could be a motivator for removing a tree. So that might be considered as we look at setting that fine as well. But I'm supportive of Councillor Thick's idea to increase that fine.
I see Ms. Best has a hand up.
Thank you, Mayor Law. Just to support Mr. Rogers' comments about looking into what the actual maximums are. There are set maximums that we are allowed to set, and it's per bylaw. So one bylaw, I believe it's the fees bylaw, is a maximum of 1,000, and other bylaws, if they are long form offenses, just from my quick overview right now of what I'm familiar with, is 10,000 maximum. So we do have to do a little research, and I do think it would be appropriate to look at our parity municipalities to see what their fines are, so we can come back to you with looking at a little more robust research on what is appropriate for our community, but also within our legal boundaries.
Excellent. I did look those up as well, and Oak Bay, Councillor Thick shared Oak Bays with me, and we did look through those things. I also looked up the fee bylaws and ticketing bylaw maximum. So perhaps without further ado, we can refer this back to Mr. Rogers.
Can I just step in there? Is it possible for council to finish the readings for the bylaw itself, and then we'll come back to council with the fines, because they're two separate bylaws And
Oh,
it would
yeah.
be nice to get the trees protected sooner rather than later, and then come back. And so what's going to happen today is we'll protect the trees, which aren't protected right now, and then we won't have any fines if they're cut down between now and by the time we come back to council, just so we're clear on what the process is right now.
Sure, actually, that's great. Thank you very much, Mr. Rogers. And perhaps what we can do is if there's no objection, we can simply adopt this as is in entirety, and then come back and look at those fines at a later date and increase the fines. If this is going to take some time, it's probably better. Is that something we can do, or do you just want us to remove the fine?
I think I might defer to Ms. Bass, but I just, the way I think about this is this bylaw. So we're talking about, we haven't ever amended this bylaw. So we're amending this bylaw specifically for this property. But when we put the fines in place, those fines will cover any trees that we decide to add into this bylaw into the future. And the other part of them, which is great, but the part I don't understand is as we work through our work plan and the tree bylaw, how those are going to overlap. But I think I would rather have some sort of protection as soon as I can, and then come back to council with a more fulsome report that potentially brings in the tree bylaw that we're supposed to be writing, or just a quick amendment to increase the fines for the bylaw.
Okay. Well, let's go ahead and do that. Let's see here. Let's pull it up here. So let's say we recommend that the District of Tofino seek different tree bylaw amendment. Now, is the whole amendment minus the, let me just look here.
Through the mayor, if I may, I would recommend what Mr. Rogers, I think what I understand you're saying is we read both resolutions here, we adopt them, and then we at least get some kind of protection in place. At this point, we're only doing first, second, and third readings. So we do need to come back for adoption at the next council meeting, which will be August 24th. So at least we'll have some sort of fine mechanism in place until larger fine amounts can be set and assigned. So today we just need to get the first three readings of the both bylaw amendments in, and then we'll come back for adoption on the 24th.
I see. Okay. Understood. Would somebody like to move the recommendation? Go ahead, Councillor Thick.
Move that the District of Tofino Significant Tree Bylaw Amendment 856/01/2021 be introduced and read a first, second, and third time, and that the District of Tofino Municipal Ticket Information System and Bylaw Notice Enforcement Amendment Bylaw number 110716/2021 be introduced and read a first, second, and third time.
Seconded by Councillor Chalmers. Any further comments? All in favor? Thank you for that. Moving on, we have 9.2 Coastal Floodplain Review Bylaw. And this is a report again from Mr. Rogers.
Great. I'll just share my screen here. I assume you're all looking at the new PowerPoint format. So today I'm giving a very quick presentation on the Coastal Floodplain Bylaw 1294 for second and third reading. There's the background to this report, and this will be fairly quick. There's more information in the report, as well as the report for first reading. Just to remind council that floodplains are the responsibility of municipalities, and that's why we're undertaking this and not the province. In developing the guidelines, we have to, the regulations, we have to follow provincial guidelines that are set forth for us in legislation, as well as an actual document about floodplains. In Tofino, this is mostly going to, or not mostly, it's primarily going to affect coastal flooding areas, so the coastline, not our streams or rivers. We're basing the bylaw off of our flood mapping project and comprehensive coastal flood risk assessments that we undertook in 2018 and 2019. And this bylaw was given first reading on April 13th, 2021. And at this time, staff are not recommending any changes aside from the addition of an appendices for the bylaw. So in summary, the bylaw is being developed to improve our community resilience over about a 100-year time frame. We have policy direction in both the vision to action and our official community plan to develop floodplain bylaws and coastal protection and take care of coastal protection. We believe there'll be little impact to existing developments. If you were to do a small addition that was under 10% of your, total site area, your total house area, you wouldn't need to worry about the conditions of the other regulations. They will be triggered at building permit. So if you decide to do something larger, the trigger for us is a building permit. So we would review any building permit against the floodplain bylaw. And finally, insurance impacts are expected to be negligible. In discussing this with the province, with private insurers, we're of the opinion that insurance will not be impacted, or if it is, it'll be negligible. After first reading, we promised to council that we would go out and undertake a consultation process. And so we used the Talk Tofino platform to do that. It was on the site for about a month. We had 263 individual visitors. We had 98 visitors who were engaged, 4 surveys, and 1 person who provided feedback. We responded to the feedback, and as a result of that feedback, developed additional communication tools, which I think you would have reviewed in the report, but are also available right now. And so looking at this slide from left to right, we see Middle Chesterman there that shows a water depth of 0.5 meter and a freeboard of 0.6 meters. That would give us the SEL there of 6.1 meters. So that if you're in the Mid-Chesterman area in that specific location, you can see what a flood might look like if it was the 1 in 200 year flood, and if you had a meter of sea level rise. You can see the same flood at North Chesterman, and you can see the water there is a little bit deeper. The freeboard stays the same. And then finally at Mackenzie Beach, it's significantly deeper. And again, this is just because our topography and our shorelines and the geographies are different. We did actually take a photo of the South Chesterman lot next to the washrooms, and it's high enough that it doesn't actually show any water. So it really does depend on where you are along our shorelines and how far in you are. And so because of the level of detail we have, these floodplain areas are fairly broad. They're not meant to be very specific to a single property, as that would involve spending millions and millions of dollars to determine that. That's what it looked like if you're standing on the beach. In 100 years from now, with a sea level rise and a big storm, you're actually underwater. So I just thought I'd show this slide because I thought it was funny. And finally, that's it for this report. I'd love to take any questions or comments.
Thank you, Mr. Rogers. I found the report excellent. Great work. And Councillor Steer.
Great. Thank you, Mr. Rogers. I just have a quick comment and then one question. I just want to put into context the absolute sea level rise that we're talking about here. And I'm not a climate denier, but I just want to put in context that with the most comprehensive data that's been in our excellent reports, the flood mapping project and the comprehensive coastal flood risk assessment, within that report, it talks about an absolute sea level rise of 1.7 millimeters per year. And that's accounting for isostatic rebound, the lifting of Vancouver Island, and the rising level of the seawater. So that 1.7 millimeter sea level rise, the 1 meter context, will take approximately 588 years to come about. I just want to put that into context. 0.5 meter would be 294. So that's just to give you an idea of the time frames that we're looking at with the sea level rise component of this report. So just for context, I just had one quick question, Mr. Rogers. The regulations in the report talks about it's triggered through the building permit application process, and I completely understand the logic behind that. I just wondered, is there any other ways that the regulation could be triggered, for example, through an OCP? I'm just curious as to, I totally get it. I just didn't know if there was other mechanisms out there that would trigger those regulations to come into force.
This bylaw in particular is triggered off the a building permit. that's the level of that we receive it at. But in our OCP, we also have our floodplain areas noted as well. We have foreshore development permit areas. And so as we work through development applications in those areas, these are the types of conversations we have with developers. So if someone was building a new resort, for example, on Mackenzie Beach, they would be working with the Public Works and the building inspector during the rezoning process to understand what their flood construction level may be. This is just to remind council that the flood bylaw is a way to make this transparent. We're already doing this work. This work has been undertaken by district staff for the last 3 years. This just helps people understand where they're in and gives them a little bit more information about where to go and save them from having to do the work of hiring a geoscientist in some instances. So those conversations, while this is particularly triggered at building permit, we do have these conversations at every level of development.
Thank you. And if there's no further questions, I can move the recommendation.
I think Councillor Thick has her hand up there. Go ahead, Councillor Thick, and then we'll move.
Yeah. So it just takes a second to unmute. Yeah, thank you, Mr. Rogers. And I think it's an amazing report and took me quite a while to digest it all. I had a couple of points or questions, I guess, about it. And as you just said, and Councillor Steer introduced this, if this is triggered at the building permit stage, and we have campgrounds that are being considered within the floodplain area, as we recently saw, then how would council, how would staff deal with either commercial campground development or residential campground development or something that isn't a permanent structure, because those seem to be excluded? How would this be captured, and how would we be able to respond to that if it's a building permit, and do campgrounds, are they considered under a building permit? That's my first question.
Yeah, so we would look at it. It actually just depends on what the form the development is coming to us in, whether it's coming as a temporary use permit, whether it's coming as a development permit, whether it's coming as an OCP amendment or zoning. All that will dictate how it comes to council and the kind of decisions we make about it. Some of the research I've been doing on floodplains, and this is again more for riverine flooding areas, is that uses such as campgrounds are not a terrible use for floodplains because of the seasonality of them, because of the fact that they don't have permanent infrastructure in place, and so something like a campground may be different, but we may not even ask that. We may ask that question in rezoning. We may not ask that in a temporary use permit. So. I don't know if I can answer that question, without actually looking at the application. But again, it's something. If we look at any of our zoning reports that come to council, in every single one of those reports for the last year or 2 years, they've had a section on tsunami, in addition to have a section on coastal flooding. We look at it when we do TUPs. We look at it DPs. So council will have the opportunity to talk with that and use that as one of the many pieces of information to make a determination on a future application.
Yeah, thank you. And so I hear what you're saying, and I just wonder how also is First Nations communities aware of this as well, because with us being so dovetailed with Tinwis and the potential future development there too, we don't know what's coming down, but is this information shared, and is there any way that we could be liable for development that happens on a floodplain that maybe is, I don't know, within the district, but not within the district?
Yeah, I don't think there's any weird place for us to be liable. There is I think you raise a good point, in the sense this is provincial legislation, not federal legislation, and what happens on federal lands is federal lands. When we do speak to our partners at the Tla-o-qui-aht First Nation, in particular about Tinwis, we provide all the information that we have to them. I recently provided all of our mapping to them as well. There are different layers. I do know also, while we were doing the two big projects that led up to the floodplain bylaw, they are also working with the federal government to do something very similar. And I would be surprised if they didn't have that same information. But it's the kind of information that we want to share as widely and as much as possible, so that we have good development applications come in there, that people, before they decide they want to do something, have a really good idea of what's coming down the pipe in terms of sea level rise and storms.
And that was my second question, is how do we communicate this information, or just the nubbin of this information, to the public, so that, you know, you at the district don't get completely inundated with people asking silly questions after they maybe bought a piece of land and they have high hopes for it. When, you know, how is it, can we put these maps in public places so people start to understand that we are, as a district, preemptively looking at this, and we've invested money, we've invested time, staff time, and this is important to us. And so when things come down or come at us that are incongruent with this, that we can actually say, no, we uphold this floodplain bylaw, and as such, we will not grant what people are maybe expecting to do. So how do we communicate this to the general public so that their level of understanding is increased?
I love that question. I think sometimes that just comes down to the, you know, the gap that I feel between, you know, what we do sometimes here in planning and what the community understands is going on. And so I think I'm excited that I've found out that we're going to have a full-time communications person soon, and that as we start, finishing, like giving final reading to certain plans like this, that we can maybe work closely with our communications department and start proactively getting that information out in the same way that we've been doing for parking or daycare or any of the other information out. I've been really impressed looking at my Instagram feed about the kind of information I'm getting from the district. Maybe perhaps that's something that the management team and I can discuss about. And I think the other piece of that, Councillor Thick, is for us, and we have a good relationship, but just to reinforce our relationships with the real estate agents who tend to be the people that talk to the people who are new to the community who don't know this, so that not just are we broadcasting to the people that are here, but also to the potential people that might be moving here. And so we have a fairly good relationship with the local realtors, and this may be one of the ones that we want to sit down and have a meeting with them as stakeholders.
Great. So I just want you to know that in passing and accepting this and all the work that's been put into it, I also would love to see what you're saying come true, that people actually start to understand this as common knowledge and it won't be a surprise to them. Thank you.
Thank you. I was wondering if I could just take one quick moment to share. There's actually, as we were talking about this for the last week, there's new data out about sea level rise, and so I expect I'll be back in front of council next year updating this bylaw, which is always intended to be updating. I was hoping I'd have a couple of years before I started, but if I just share really briefly, this just came out from the federal government. And so basically it's telling us, so this is the Tofino area, and it does it for the whole country. It's a fascinating website that has temperature, sea level rise, precipitation, but for over the next 100 years, Tofino's the latest data, and this is including the isostatic rebound and the fact that we're moving up, is looking about 50 to 83 centimeters over the next 100 years. And again, just for information's sake, and just the fact that I think this is a really cool website with lots of information, but that the floodplain that we're looking at is for a fairly large storm with the associated sea level rise, right? And so it's the understanding that, like, it's a 200-year storm with a level of sea level rise. We could get a 1 in 500-year storm. We could get a 1 in 1,000-year storm, and just understanding that it's what the provincial guidelines would tell us the storm to use. It doesn't mean we won't get something worse than that, or people won't get their feet wet further back. It's just a recognized standard to try to have some sort of consistency across the province.
Excellent work, Mr. Rogers. It's great to see policy catching up with climate change science and prepping for the future. If you could actually share that website, we'd love to see that website. And we'll get that up, and everybody can go on that. Thank you very much. Without further ado, Mr. Councillor Steer, would you like to move this?
Right. I did offer that. I just maybe quickly defer to Ms. Best. Is each one of the district the first one to be read for a second and third time, and then we then move on to the next and the next, or can I do them all at once?
Thank you, Councillor Steer. That's an excellent question. And when you see we've got the semicolons there and the and that, it's all one large resolution. And so if we ever had a discrepancy where one of those resolutions was not to be supported, we could break that apart. But right now it's just one full read, one vote.
Thank you.
Great question.
The District of Tofino Coastal Floodplain Bylaw number 1294/2021 be read a first, second, and third time, and that the District of Tofino Fees and Charges Amendment Bylaw number 1271-06/2021 be read a first, second, and third time, and that District of Tofino Floodplain Policy attached as Appendix 7 to the Coastal Floodplain Bylaw 1294/2021, second and third reading, report dated August 10th, 2021, be adopted.
Sorry, seconded by Councillor Challenger. Any further comments? All in favor? Seeing none opposed, motion is carried. Thank you, Mr. Rogers. Moving on to 9.3, special event permits. We have Jazz on the Green. We have a report from Public Spaces, Cultural and Visitor Initiatives. Ms. Vermont.
Thank you, Mayor Law. Ms. Vermont's not here today. There is no presentation scheduled, but should there be questions, we do have our cultural and event programmer, Cindy, available here. So if she has questions, she can answer them for the event.
Okay, perfect. Any questions for Cindy? Seeing none, would somebody like to move this?
I'll move.
Councillor Chalmers, I looked away.
Go ahead, Councillor Chalmers.
Okay, thanks. I'll move that the staff be authorized to issue a special event permit conditional on the following requirements be met for the use of the Village Green to organizers of the Jazz on the Green event scheduled to be held September 10th to 11th, 2021. Provision of a $500 refundable damage deposit, provision of a certificate of insurance naming the District of Tofino as additional insured, provision of an event safety plan that includes communicable disease section prior to the event, and provision of the event's temporary food premise for special event food service permit approval.
Second.
Second by Councillor Anderson. Any comments? All in favor? All in favor, none opposed, motion's carried. And we have 9.3 BC Active Transportation Infrastructure Funding Application. Is this just a report or do we have a presentation?
Through the mayor, there is no presentation for this as well. And we do have Miss Atiana here, should there be questions, but she's not the project lead on this. So we can do the surface level questions about grant funding if you need.
Okay, do we have any questions or can we move this? Is that a question, Councillor Thick? Okay, question from Councillor Thick. And do you have a question as well, Councillor Steer? Okay, go ahead, Councillor Thick. Question for Ms. Atiana.
Yeah, thank you. I just wondered, it seems like a fairly large grant, and I read online that it was, I guess previously this was called Bike BC. I'm just wondering if other projects were considered as opposed to the one that we are being asked to consider today.
Thank you for the question through the mayor to Councillor Thick. Typically when a grant opportunity comes up like this, we will all discuss it at the management meeting and talk about project priorities and decide on the best project to apply for. In this case, it was Campbell Street Phase 3. As discussed through the budget process, we did indicate that this project would likely not be able to go forward as planned if grants were not obtained. So we are quite excited to apply for this grant for this project so that we can see it proceed.
Okay, good. And it also says in the report that the district would share in the I don't know what my question is, what is the district share? Do we have to match the amount that is given, or is there a maximum amount that we will match if government funding is given?
We will be required to contribute RMI funds for this project, and I don't have handy all of the funding sources currently, so I can't actually answer that question quickly for you, Councillor Thick, but I could follow up with an email to council after today's meeting.
I was just curious, but obviously if this has been considered, then the money is in the budget perhaps, as you're saying, through the RMI then?
Yeah, I know that is one of the funding sources, but I can't recall if there are other funding sources. I know that this project is not funded by property taxation. I could confirm that, but in terms of what the other funding sources are, I can't confirm that at this time.
Yeah, I was just curious because when I thought about the project, I understand its importance, and I think it's really great that we, after many years, complete that whole section. I'm supportive of that. I just was wondering what is the district's portion in this, and what if the grant isn't given? What do we do? What are we going to do then with that leg of the the Campbell Street upgrade? What might happen? Where would we go?
I also can't answer that question. I think that's probably a question for the project manager, but typically, if I could just speak generally about grants that we're not successful with, we work together to come up with alternative funding sources. And if they are, perhaps it could be other grant streams that we could apply for, or other funding sources that we haven't considered. If they significantly differ from what was indicated in the financial plan, then those will typically come back to council for discussion.
Okay, great. Thank you.
Councillor Steer.
Yeah, I won't belabor this. It's approximately 30% that we would be eligible for in the funding sources RMI, and I just made the assumption that our manager that's responsible for this file was very confident that those funding sources would be in place, but I believe it's 30% that we are eligible for the full funding costs, of which I think the whole project was roughly $1 million, somewhere high 900s. So I won't go any further, but thank you.
Yeah, I believe those numbers are in the report. Anybody else like to comment? No, seeing none, then would somebody like to move this motion? Councillor Anderson.
I'll move this motion. I move that the District of Tofino staff be authorized to prepare an application to the BC Active Transportation and Infrastructure Program in the amount of $500,000 in support of the Campbell Street Phase 3 Cycling and Pedestrian Infrastructure Upgrades Project.
We have a seconder, seconded by Councillor Chalmers. Any further comments?
Sorry, there was part I didn't move.
Right.
There's an end that the District of Tofino agrees to fund the applicant's share of eligible project costs. There, now I've finished moving it.
And seconded by Councillor Chalmers again. And any further comments? I just want to say it's an excellent project, and I hope we are successful. Without further ado, all in favor? And none opposed, motion's carried. 9.5, beach pay parking amendments. Now this is a report. Oh, there's Mr. Works. Great to see you.
Thanks and good evening, Mayor and Council. Today, there is a report in front of Council for bylaw amendments for the Tofino Municipal Tax Information System and Bylaw Notice Enforcement Amendment Bylaw 1107-0.17. I do not have a presentation for Council, but can just provide a high-level overview of what's before Council for consideration and take any questions after that. This represents the final of 3 bylaws required to amend in order to support the changes of the beach pay parking system. Council has seen the previous 2 bylaws and read those prior to the summer break period in July. This is the final one, which essentially provides the coverage for an authorized service provider to be a participant and administrator of some of the processes that are included in the dispute resolution process, and tidy up and align some of the language that's in this bylaw that would reflect this new change and new system that's in place, similar to what we've seen in the other bylaws. There's a 2-page short report, which is supported by an appendix, which is the amendment bylaw itself, with the title and the number that I previously read. And this would essentially solidify some of those final numbers and administrative processes that are required for us to continue moving forward with the beach pay parking system, as that did go for its first day of implementation, and it is now in place. We, of course, are starting with a very light touch of enforcement during this initial first phase, focusing on education and awareness, And it was deemed reasonable that we wouldn't necessarily need this bylaw for the first little while because we wouldn't be issuing any tickets while we got used to the new system and how it works with both residents and visiting members of the public. So with that, I'll turn over to council and the mayor for any questions. And if I need help, my lifeline will be to Ms. Best on the bylaw side, and I'll rely on her expertise in this area for support of any questions. Thank you.
Super, thank you, Mr. Wick. I have no questions. Council? I see no questions. In that case, would somebody like to move this recommendation? Councilor Challenger, go ahead.
So I'll move that the District of Tofino Municipal Ticket Information System and Bylaw Notice Enforcement Amendment Bylaw number 1107.17, 2021 be introduced and read a first, second, and third time.
Seconded by Councilor Chalmers. Any further comments? Thank you for your work on this, Mr. Fraser. All in favor? None opposed, motion's carried. Excellent. Bylaws, nothing under bylaws. Business initiated by council members. Do we have any external appointment verbal reports? It's summertime, I doubt it. Nothing going on, which is great. We have no unfinished business, and we have a question period. Do we have anybody signed up for questions?
Thank you, Mayor Law. We don't have any requests and signups, but I will call once, I will call twice, and I'll call thrice, and neither of our two attendees submitted a question, so no questions tonight.
All right. Well, thank you everybody for attending. The closed session has been removed, so I move adjournment. Seconder, seconded by Councilor Challenger. All in favor? Excellent. Great. Motion's carried. See you later, everybody.